The hum of the coffee shop wrapped around me, a restless buzz of clinking cups and half-finished conversations. I stood there, just inside the door, heart hammering against my ribs, every part of me convinced that somehow every eye in the room had turned my way. I moved toward the counter with careful, deliberate steps, acutely aware of how my shoes sounded against the floor, how my jacket sat awkwardly on my shoulders. Should I have worn something else? Should I have smiled more as I walked in? Should I? The questions clung to me like static, sparking and crackling with every breath. When it was finally my turn to order, I fumbled my words. The barista smiled or maybe smirked, I couldn't tell, and I found myself ordering the first thing that came to mind, desperate to retreat from the invisible spotlight burning into my skin. Coffee in hand, I slid into the corner seat, hoping, no, willing myself to disappear. And yet, even tucked away, the feeling didn't leave me. I stirred my drink mechanically, the spoon clinking louder than it should have, each movement magnified under the lens of my own hyper-awareness. Around me, the world moved with effortless rhythm. A group of friends laughed without hesitation. A woman typed rapidly on her laptop, focused and unbothered. A couple leaned into each other, lost in their own orbit. How? How were they so at ease while I sat here, a tangle of nerves and noise? I thought back to interviews where I rehearsed every answer, to dates where I analyzed every word, to friendships where I filtered every joke. Every moment spent gripping, shaping, polishing myself into something acceptable. And still, so often, the tighter I held on, the more disconnected I became. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. And for a fleeting second I glimpsed the weight of it all, how much energy I poured into control, into micromanaging how the world would perceive me. Maybe, a quiet voice suggested, you're making it harder than it needs to be. The idea was almost laughable. Let go, stop caring so much. Wouldn't everything fall apart? But then, across the room, a man dropped his coffee lid. It clattered loudly onto the floor. He chuckled, shrugged, picked it up without fuss, and moved on. No one stared. No one whispered. The world did not end. I watched him, a strange feeling blooming inside me, part awe, part longing. Maybe life wasn't meant to be gripped so tightly. Maybe the constant vigilance, the endless effort to appear right, was the very thing keeping me from belonging. And maybe, just maybe, there was a different way to live. I sat back against my chair, letting the hum of the coffee shop wash over me without resistance. Somewhere deep inside, a small seed planted itself, fragile but stubborn. There has to be a better way to live. If you've ever felt that heavy grip too, you're not alone. Feel free to share a moment below. There was a day I almost forgot to care. Not because I gave up, but because, for once, I simply existed. It was a Saturday, the kind of day that arrives with no demands, no lists, no expectations. The sun spilled generously over the sidewalks, and the air carried the kind of quiet warmth that made everything feel lighter. I didn't have anywhere urgent to be. I wasn't dressed for anyone's approval, just a worn hoodie, scuffed sneakers, and a mind blessedly free of scripts. I wandered into a park I hadn't planned on visiting, drawn by nothing more than the way the breeze played with the leaves. By the fountain, a woman was tossing bread to the pigeons. She caught my eye and smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile I was so used to passing, but a simple one full of lightness. I smiled back without overthinking it, and it felt natural. Further down the path, a man strummed a guitar under the shade of an old oak tree. His case was open for tips, though he played like he would have played anyway, even if no one listened. The notes floated through the air, raw, imperfect, alive. I sat nearby, not because I felt obligated, but because something about the sound anchored me in that moment. No agenda, no checklist, just life, unfolding without my control, and somehow, without my anxiety. Without even trying, I found myself in conversation with strangers, about nothing important, the weather, the odd way ducks wagged their tails when they walked, a dog chasing its own leash. We laughed at nothing, at everything, and for once, I wasn't monitoring my words or gauging their reactions. I was just there, unfiltered, unguarded, and life, shockingly, didn't fall apart. It blossomed. Sitting on a worn wooden bench, I watched the clouds drift lazily across the wide blue sky. I thought about all the times I had tried to force things into existence, the perfect interview answer, the carefully crafted text, the rigidly planned life. And here, in the absence of force, everything felt so much closer, so much realer. Ease, not effort, created connection. The realization hit me like a breath of clean air. It wasn't about giving up. It wasn't about caring less about life. It was about caring less about controlling it. I tilted my head back, letting the sunlight warm my face, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing life. I felt like I was walking with it. Could it be? Could ease really replace effort? Ever had a moment where everything just clicked when you weren't even trying? I'd love to hear your story. I still remember the first time I heard the image. Life is like a handful of sand. Hold it loosely and it stays. Clench your fist and it slips away. At the time, it sounded poetic, but distant. Now, sitting cross-legged on the smooth wooden floor of a meditation class, it hit differently. It felt real. The room was dim, filled with the soft scent of incense and the barely there rustle of people settling into stillness. The instructor's voice was calm, almost a whisper, inviting us to breathe, to notice, to let go. At first, I fought it. My mind, so used to clinging and controlling, scrambled for something to hold on to. An errand I had forgotten, a conversation I replayed for the 100th time, a future event I needed to prepare for, anything to avoid simply being. But slowly the walls began to crack. Memories surfaced, sharp, unwelcome. The job I had chased relentlessly, only to watch slip through my fingers. The relationship I had tried to fix with desperate texts, over-explanations, endless compromises, until it withered under the weight of my fear. The friendships, strained by my need to be understood, to be liked, to be enough. Each scene flickered like old film reels behind my closed eyes, gripping tighter, losing faster. My chest tightened. A wave of sadness rose, thick and uninvited. For a moment I wanted to get up and walk away, distract myself, do something. But the instructor's voice anchored me back. Breathe. Let it be what it is. So I stayed. I let the sadness fill the space. I didn't fight it. I didn't fix it. And slowly, so slowly, it began to move. Not outwards, not away, but through me, like a current through open hands. I realized something then, not in my mind, but somewhere deeper, somewhere wordless. The more tightly I gripped life, the faster it drained away. The more desperately I tried to hold on to people, moments, outcomes, the more they slipped beyond my reach. It wasn't that life was cruel, it was that life demanded space to breathe, and I had been suffocating it with my need for certainty, for security, for guarantees. I opened my hands on my lap, palms up, fingers loose. There was nothing to hold, and somehow that felt okay. When the session ended, I walked out into the crisp evening air. The city buzzed around me, taxis honking, lights flashing, people rushing past. Nothing had changed, except me. I wasn't gripping anymore. Not perfectly, not forever. But for this moment I had loosened my fist. If letting go was so natural, why had it taken me so long to remember? If this moment resonated with you, maybe tap the like button. Small support, big impact. There's a story about an artist, how they painted their greatest masterpiece in under 10 minutes. No drafts, no careful sketches. Just one sweeping, instinctive act of creation, like the canvas had been waiting for them all along. I used to think stories like that were exaggerated, romanticized. Surely real success came from endless grinding, meticulous planning, obsessive tweaking. Surely effort was the price of greatness. But the more I lived, the more I noticed. Magic didn't happen when I gritted my teeth and pushed harder. It happened when I forgot to try. I saw it in the artist's studio I visited one lazy afternoon. The space was sun-drenched and chaotic, full of half-finished canvases and splashes of color that looked random until you really looked. Music played low in the background, not the driving beat of ambition, but the slow sway of something deeper, older. The artists moved around their work with an easy rhythm, not rushing, not hesitating. When they picked up a brush, it wasn't with the tense precision of someone terrified of making a mistake. It was with the lightness of someone who trusted the process more than the outcome. I stood there, watching, feeling a strange ache rise in my chest. This was the opposite of how I had been living. Where I planned, they played. Where I forced, they flowed. Where I feared getting it wrong, they trusted that wrong wasn't even the point. I thought about all the times I had tried to force inspiration, all the essays rewritten until the words lost their soul, all the conversations rehearsed until they sounded hollow, all the dreams crushed under the weight of my own expectations. I had confused control with creation, discipline with destiny. But real creation, real living, wasn't about squeezing something into existence. It was about opening enough to let it through, like catching rain in open palms instead of trying to trap it in a clenched fist. I closed my eyes for a moment in that sunlit studio and breathed, not to control my breath, not to optimize it, just to feel it steady, soft, alive. Maybe life wasn't meant to be won. Maybe life wasn't a mountain to conquer, a prize to earn, a test to pass. Maybe life was a river, and maybe all it asked of me was to swim with it, not against it. I opened my eyes. The artists were laughing now, smearing colors across the canvas, in ways that broke all the rules and made something infinitely more beautiful because of it. And deep inside, something shifted. Not a dramatic revolution, but a quiet click, like a door swinging open on well-worn hinges. Maybe life isn't something to win. Maybe it's something to join. If you're feeling this shift inside too, you're exactly where you need to be. There's something hypnotic about watching a river, the way it moves, endlessly, effortlessly, carrying leaves, twigs, forgotten dreams along its surface without complaint or command. It doesn't cling to what it carries. It doesn't fight what enters its path. It simply flows. I found myself sitting by the river one late afternoon, the golden light of sunset dripping across the water like melted honey. The city, usually so urgent, seemed to hush itself here, as if the river demanded a quieter kind of reverence. I watched a single leaf floating downstream, spinning lazily, dancing with every ripple. There was no resistance, no desperation to control the current, no panic when the water turned faster or slower, just trust. And somehow sitting there I remembered the feeling of being a child, floating in a pool for the first time. How I had panicked, splashing wildly, convinced I would sink. How someone, a parent, a teacher, had said, "Stop fighting, trust the water." And when I finally did, something incredible happened. The water held me. I didn't have to thrash. I didn't have to force. I only had to trust. Somewhere along the way I had forgotten that, forgotten how to let life hold me without constant struggle. As the river whispered past, I thought about all the things I had gripped too tightly. Plans, relationships, timelines. About how I had fought the current, exhausting myself trying to swim upstream towards some imagined version of how things should be. And for what? What if the detours weren't failures? What if the currents I fought so bitterly were actually carrying me exactly where I needed to go? I sat there as the sky faded from gold to deep indigo, feeling the river's patience seep into my bones. Maybe trust wasn't passive. Maybe it wasn't giving up. Maybe it was the bravest thing I could do, and to let go of needing to control, and instead to align. To trust the bends, the rapids, the still pools. To trust that even when I couldn't see what lay ahead, the river knew. I watched another leaf glide by, carried effortlessly toward places unseen. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to chase it, or hold it, or change its course. I just watched, smiled, let it go. Could it really be this simple? And this powerful? If this moment of peace touched something in you too, maybe share it with someone who needs a little trust today. It happened in the smallest way. I was back at a coffee shop, not the same one, but it hardly mattered. Busy, loud, a little chaotic. Once a scene like this would have tightened a knot in my chest, but today was different. I ordered without overthinking, smiled without forcing, and carried my coffee to a table near the window. No strategic seat-picking, no mental rehearsals, just movement, simple and easy. As I sat down, the inevitable happened. I bumped my cup against the table edge, splashing a thin arc of coffee onto my jeans. Old me would have flinched, flushed, darted glances to see who had noticed. But now, I looked down at the stain spreading like a lazy blossom and chuckled. A soft, unforced laugh. No panic. No spiraling. Just a small moment, a blip, already dissolving into the river of the day. The people around me kept talking, typing, living. No judgment, no spotlight. Just life, moving on. I sipped what was left of my coffee, smiling at nothing in particular, feeling lighter than I had in a long, long time. And that's when I realized this too was life happening perfectly. Not because everything was under my control, not because I had perfected myself, but because I had finally and immersively stopped gripping so hard. I had let go, not of effort or care or dreams, but of the desperate need for everything to go exactly my way. I let life meet me halfway, and life, surprising, stubborn, beautiful life, and had been waiting all along. Maybe the world was always ready for me. Once I stopped trying to prove I deserved it. If you felt even a tiny shift inside by the end of this story, maybe you're already living lighter than you realize. As the last light of day slipped across the worn coffee table, a quiet truth lingered. Life doesn't ask to be controlled. It asks to be trusted. Even the smallest ripple, even the gentlest breeze, moves with a wisdom far older than our fears. Perhaps today is another chance to loosen our grip, to trust the current, and to walk a little lighter into the unknown.